municipal politics, but also showed that Americans were committed to the cultural ideals of equal opportunity for all white men. Because of the common popularity of the age of the common man, the influence on culture is evidently reflected as class divisions were blurry, as seen by similar clothing worn between classes and the lack of segregation by economic status in public places such as in transportation or hotels. One change was the culture that developed around the attitudes for reform of institutional systems such as prisons, asylums, and public schools. Previously, these systems were paid little mind to, but more attention was paid to them due to humanitarian concerns which arose from the religious awakenings. Individuals such as Dorothea Dix and Horace Mann advocated for the expansions of these systems, and this highly increased the air of attention of more reform of democratic institutions represents a new generation of Americans which culturally valued ethical treatment and greater accessibility for all. A continuity can be seen by the rise of the cult of domesticity. This only served to intensify pre-existing sexist thoughts of Republican motherhood as it continued to sell women as moral leaders of the household. The popular sentiment that a woman's sole importance was contribution to domestic life continued through the years and created a culture around a woman's life in the home. The introduction of new patent laws created a new culture of motivation of socioeconomic growth through technological advances. An example of this can be seen by the creation of Eli Whitney's cotton gin. This system allowed his innovations and many others to influence society in a greater way than ever before because technological improvements were finally being supported. His invention specifically also served to create new regional cultural characteristics in the South as it further allowed them to prosper individually and alienate themselves from the culture of the North. The Second Great Awakening can be seen as a continuity because it only intensified the already prominent Protestant religious beliefs in America since and before the First Great Awakening. Because Americans continued to devote themselves to religion, this was able to influence culture because of the practices of Protestant life, which were so closely intertwined with communities, such as mass gatherings in churches and the influence on the school systems. The Embargo of 1807 and the Non-Intercourse Act of 1809 can be seen to have a great effect to American culture because the embargo created internal sectional divisions, with the Northerners against it and the Southerners for it. This can be further supported by the Hartford Convention, in which New England threatened to secede from the Union due to economic pressure, but ultimately resulted in an even greater dissension between the two regional characteristics. This time period has been changed from 1800 to 1840. This is because a greater turning point in culture can be seen in 1840 than in 1848. The era of the common man of Jacksonian democracy ended in 1840 due to the transfer of presidential power to the Whigs. This marked a cultural shift because the age of the common man highlighted the ideals of an agrarian republic society and the popularity of a small government interaction with state affairs. The end of this age also coincided with a shift of regional reform movements. Due to the Mexican-American War, the focus on conflict over slavery exploded. In the early to mid-19th century, there was a focus on all sorts of social reform, from temperance, women's rights, to mentally ill rights, and more. But the Mexican-American War, which officially began in 1846, overshadowed most humanitarian culture issues and created a much larger focus on slavery. The icon of Manifest Destiny can be seen as a continuity because it simply built upon the cultural ideals of American expansionism. Since the time of Jefferson and before, there had been an ideal of an agrarian republic, and for this to be possible, there must always be enough land for farmers to till and to keep the promise of opportunity, and it was now simply being re-expressed as a moral duty to expand, which can be seen by the Gold Rush and the Mexican-American War. A change that can be seen in this time period is the popularization of abolitionist literature. The publications of novels such as Beecher's Uncle Tom's Cabin allowed for many Americans to gain a sympathetic view towards slaves and act towards abolitionist causes, or at least free soil causes. This literature had such a great influence because it allowed for a fictional, intimate relationship between the audience and slaves to form, allowing the audience to grow sympathy for the abolitionist cause due to the awful system that the slaves were portrayed in. This also added to the regional cultural divisions, as the literature was oftentimes embraced in the North and banned in the South. Although the Declaration of Sentiments was drafted in 1848, the issues of feminism were placed on the back burner during the Civil War, which caused a continuity in attitudes towards women. The Civil War's woman's role as a domestic leader were reinforced by the way in which the only support a woman could show was being a nurse. Some individuals, such as Francis Clayton, even went as far as to pretend to be a man in order to fight, which reinforced the subordinate position of women. A change which can be seen is the liberation of African Americans, which created new black culture and communities. Through the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, African Americans were officially free and were able to form their own new cities and express themselves through churches and colleges such as Howard College, and through aid provided by the Freedmen's Bureau. This expansion of freedoms allowed for free African American cities to thrive and distinct culture to form without as many constraints from their former slave owners. The rise of the KKK can be seen as a continuity in American history. The horribly racist group built atop previously American cultural societies, such as the Know Nothing Party, which also stood for white native-born American ideals. Because the KKK and early-era nativist party both encouraged white supremacy, the rise of racist groups can be seen in the continuity of American history, as it created a cult out of a culture of racist ideologies. The reintroduction of the South to the Union created a drastic change in the culture of the United States of America. Initially, the reintroduction was viewed as a major embarrassment to many white Southerners, as Black Americans were now able to participate in politics, but quickly, Black codes created much resistance within integration, and the initial resentment from the South only intensified to arouse more suspicion of Northerners, which created a deep culture of legal racism.
So, for time period 6, one continuity in American culture and society is the inequality in the labor workforce.